Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go!
In the store I work at, I started out as a cart pusher, then moved to stocking shelves. And for the past year, I've been working in the online shopping department. Basically, I walk around the store with a cart and a scanner, picking items for customers who ordered online. It's not a bad gig, honestly. I get my steps in, the time passes quickly, and I don't have to deal with customers face to face most of the time. The online shopping thing really exploded during the pandemic and never really slowed down. People got used to the convenience, I guess. Most of the time, if something's wrong with an order, customers just call the store or come to the service desk and we sort it out. Maybe they got the wrong brand of something, or their bananas were too ripe or whatever. We refund it or replace it. Everyone goes home happy. It's a pretty straightforward system. So anyway, this story happened back in January. It was a Tuesday, I think. Pretty normal day. I was standing in the back room where we keep all the online orders organized, just kind of zoning out and counting down the minutes until my lunch break at 2. The back room is pretty crammed, full of shelves with bags and bags of groceries waiting to be picked up. It's always cold back there too, which I don't mind in the summer, but in January it's just miserable. The store phone rang and my co-worker picked it up. She's this nice lady in her 40s who's been working here forever. I wasn't really paying attention at first, but I could tell from her tone that whoever was on the other end wasn't happy. After about a minute, she hung up and sighed. I got a little nosy, so I asked her if it was a customer calling. She told me yeah, and that the woman on the phone seemed really mad about something being wrong with her order. She said the customer was coming inside to talk to the manager about it. That made me nervous. Look, mistakes happen in this job. Sometimes you grab the wrong item, sometimes the produce is bad and you don't notice, whatever. Usually customers are understanding about it. But if a customer comes in demanding to see the manager, that's a different story. The manager checks the system, traces the order back to whoever picked it, and then you get an earful about quality control and being more careful. I started mentally going through everything I'd picked that day, trying to remember if I'd grabbed anything questionable. Finally, 2 o'clock rolled around. Lunchtime. I handed my key card over to my co-worker so she could access the locked areas while I was gone. But before I headed to the break room, curiosity got the better of me. I decided to walk past the service desk at the front of the store. That's where customers usually meet with the manager to complain about stuff. I wanted to see if whatever they brought in was something I had picked earlier. I tried to be subtle about it, walking slowly and staying near the edges of the store. When I got closer to the service desk, I saw this woman storming through the front entrance. She was blonde, heavy-set, middle-aged, wearing all pink like head to toe, and she was clutching a bag of avocados in her hand. I felt a wave of relief. I definitely hadn't picked any avocados that day. This wasn't my problem, but something made me stick around. I positioned myself next to this little display of cookies, pretending to look at my phone. The woman walked right past me, toward the service desk. Then she did something really weird. She stopped and just started tearing open the bag of avocados right there in the middle of the store. The lady working the service desk was helping another customer at the time. She was this sweet older woman who'd always been nice to me. I watched when the woman in pink pulled an avocado out of the bag, walked right up to the service desk, and threw it. Not like tossed it gently. I mean, she hurled that thing like she was pitching in the World Series. It missed the service desk lady and smacked into a cabinet door behind her with this loud thud. It sounded like a hockey puck hitting the boards. The service desk lady jumped forward, startled, and everyone around her backed away quickly. The customer she'd been helping looked terrified. Then the woman in pink ripped off her mask and started screaming. She yelled about whether we thought this was a joke and whether we thought we could sell stuff like this to people. The service desk lady asked her if she had just thrown an avocado at her. The woman in pink shouted that yes, she did because she'd paid $4 for the avocados and they were hard as a rock. She screamed that her kids couldn't eat them because they were dangerous and that we were trying to rip her off and she wouldn't let us. She demanded to speak to a manager right then and there, and then she threw another one. Same result, it missed the service desk lady and hit another cabinet. That's when I decided I needed to get out of there. I took off running toward the break room, my heart pounding. I could still hear her yelling even from down the hall. When I was running, I passed my manager coming out of her office, walking fast. I tried to tell her that there was a woman up front throwing avocados at people, but she said she already knew because she'd just gotten a text about it. She thanked me and kept walking toward the front while I kept going to the break room. I clocked out for my lunch break but decided to just stay in the break room until I knew things had calmed down. No way was I going to risk walking through the store with that lady still out there. Over the next 30 minutes or so, various workers came in and out of the break room, all talking about the crazy lady up front. Apparently, she kept throwing avocados at different people after I left. Someone said she'd thrown at least 7 or 8 of them total. Eventually, I saw my manager heading back to her office. I poked my head out and asked if everything was okay. She said, "Yep, all good," and explained that they'd called the police who came and collected the woman. She said that was that. I asked if the woman was arrested. My manager said, "Oh, absolutely, because she'd thrown a bunch of avocados at people." She asked who does that. I just said yikes. So yeah, that's the story. That this woman got arrested for throwing avocados at store employees over a $4 bag of produce. All she had to do was come in, show the bag to customer service, and say, "Hey, these are too hard. Can I get a refund or a replacement?" We would have said yes immediately. No questions asked. Instead, she decided to commit assault with fruit and scream at people without a mask on during a pandemic. I never found out what happened to her after the police took her away, and honestly, I don't want to know. I was 3 years into my engineering degree when I finally got sick of dorm life. The shared bathrooms, the noise, the complete lack of privacy, it was wearing me down. So when my 2 buddies said they wanted to find a place off campus, I jumped at the chance. We'd been searching for weeks when we found it. A 3-bedroom house just 15 minutes from campus with rent that seemed almost too good to be true. The landlord showed us around and everything looked perfect. Hardwood floors, updated kitchen, decent-sized bedrooms. There was a basement apartment, but he explained it had a separate entrance and the indoor stairwell had been completely sealed off years ago. My roommate asked about it, sounding concerned. The landlord told us not to worry, explaining that it was a completely separate unit and we wouldn't even know anyone was down there. My other roommate pointed at the thermostat on our wall and asked if that meant we controlled the heat for the whole building. The landlord confirmed that while the basement had its own heating system that connected to the main one, yes, the main thermostat was up here in our apartment. We should have asked more questions. We should have read the lease more carefully. But we were young and stupid and desperate to get out of the dorms. So we signed. For the first month, the basement was empty. It was perfect. We had space, privacy, and the rent was manageable when split 3 ways. Then someone moved into the basement. At first, we just heard footsteps, then we started hearing her voice. The woman downstairs had apparently never learned about indoor volume. I was studying one evening when the screaming started. She was yelling at her mother, saying she didn't care about excuses and that her mom had promised to help her. She demanded money for her phone bill and asked how she was supposed to get a job if she couldn't even make calls. It went on for 40 minutes. My roommates and I looked at each other, uncomfortable but trying to ignore it. The next week, it got worse. She was screaming at someone about where they were and why they hadn't shown up yet. She said she didn't care about their excuses and told them to just get over to her place. She mentioned bringing something, and the way she said it made my skin crawl. My roommate whispered to me, asking if she was talking about what he thought she was talking about. I didn't answer. I didn't want to know. Then came the puppies, 3 of them based on the different pitches of barking, and she screamed at them too, telling them to shut up because she was trying to sleep. This was at 3 in the afternoon. We were terrified of confronting her. What do you even say to someone like that? So we tried to live with it. We had 4 months left on our lease. We could handle it. But then the utility bills came in. Our lease said we were responsible for all utilities, period. We'd thought that meant just our apartment. Apparently, it meant the entire building. Our electric bill had tripled. Our gas bill was insane. She was down there running space heaters and probably never turning off a single light. My roommate wanted to talk to the landlord, but my other roommate asked what the landlord would even do since we'd already signed the lease. He said we were screwed. I suggested we only had 2 months left now and that we should just ride it out. Then she started smoking. At first, I thought I was imagining it. A faint smell of cigarettes that seemed to come and go. But within days, it was unmistakable. Smoke was pouring up through the heating vents. Our apartment reeked. Our clothes reeked. My textbooks reeked. I called the landlord immediately and told him I needed to talk about the tenant downstairs. He said he'd talk to her about the smoking issue. I told him that talking wasn't enough because we'd signed a lease for a non-smoking apartment, and this was a lease violation. He explained that technically she had a separate apartment. He added that technically we lived in a state where a non-smoking apartment could share ventilation with a smoking apartment. I said that made no sense, and he told me to take it up with the state legislature because his hands were tied. I wanted to scream. Instead, I just hung up. 2 days later, my roommates left for a 2-week vacation. They were online students who could work from anywhere. I was residential and had labs I couldn't miss, so I stayed behind alone in an apartment that smelled like an ashtray, with a woman downstairs who screamed at everyone and smoked constantly. My stomach started hurting. Just a dull ache at first, then constant cramping. I couldn't eat without feeling sick. I couldn't sleep because the smell was everywhere. After 3 days alone, I'd barely slept 10 hours total. I was exhausted, angry, and a little bit insane. That's when I made my plan. I checked the weather forecast. Lows in the 20s all week. Perfect. I called a buddy who worked in plumbing and asked him a hypothetical question about how cold the house could get before the pipes burst. He asked me why I was asking. I told him to just answer the question. He said I'd have to get below freezing for an extended period, and when I kept it above 35 or 40 degrees, I should be fine. Then he asked again what I was planning, sounding more serious this time. I told him nothing and that I was just curious. I borrowed another friend's ultra-insulated sleeping bag, the kind rated for negative temperatures. I bought a ski mask with holes for the eyes and mouth. I dug out my stocking cap, my silk-long underwear, my woolen socks, and my down parka. I stocked up on tea, hot cocoa, and ramen. For the next 2 weeks, I'd be living off hot liquids in spite. Then I walked over to the thermostat and turned off the heat. Day 1, she was screaming at her mother through the floor. I could hear her saying that her mom had forced her to move into this frozen piece of garbage apartment. She called the place a dump and demanded that her mother send her money so she could get out of there. I sat upstairs in my sleeping bag, sipping hot cocoa, listening to every word. Day 2, she was screaming at her boyfriend or dealer or whatever he was. She accused him of not even letting her crash at his place for a few nights and said she was freezing. She asked what kind of boyfriend he was. I made myself another cup of tea. Day 3, she called the landlord. I could hear her through the floor telling him the heat was broken and that she was absolutely freezing down there. She demanded he fix it immediately. 20 minutes later, there was a knock on my door. I answered it wearing my full Arctic expedition outfit, ski mask, parka, stocking cap, the works. The landlord greeted me and said he'd gotten a call from his tenant downstairs saying the heat wasn't working. I told him the heat worked fine. He looked confused and asked why it was so cold in the apartment then. I said I'd found all the cigarette smoke a little warm. He stared at me for a long moment. Then he actually smiled just a little. He said he understood and noted that since the thermostat was in my apartment, I guess I control the temperature. He left without another word. Day 4, she was still screaming, but now about me. She was telling someone on the phone that the jerks upstairs had turned off the heat and asking if they could believe that. She kept going on about how it was the middle of winter. Day 5, the screaming reached a new level. I sat upstairs clutching my car keys and pepper spray was 911 already typed into my phone just in case she decided to come after me. She was yelling that she was done and leaving. She announced she was moving in with her friend even though he'd just gotten out of jail for stabbing somebody. She mentioned he lived in a creepy house in the woods with dogs that bit everyone, but at least it would be warm there. Day 6, I woke up to silence. Beautiful, perfect silence. I crept downstairs and peeked out the window. Her car was gone. I checked the basement entrance. Empty. I went back upstairs and turned the heat back on. When warm air started flowing through the vents, for the first time in almost a week, I didn't smell cigarette smoke anymore. I texted my roommates telling them she was gone, and the crisis was over. When they got back, the apartment still smelled faintly of smoke, but it was already starting to fade. We finished out our lease in peace. The landlord never rented out the basement again while we were there. I met my boyfriend through mutual friends at a party and we hit it off immediately. He was kind, supportive, and made me laugh even on my worst days. We'd been together for about 2 years when this whole nightmare started. That day we just needed to pick up some groceries and household items. It was supposed to be a quick trip. I remember I was wearing my favorite dress and heels because we had plans to grab dinner afterward at this nice restaurant we've been wanting to try. I looked nothing like an employee at that store. The staff wore red vests and khaki pants. I was in a floral dress and uncomfortable heels that I was already regretting. My boyfriend went to grab something from a different aisle while I browsed the shelves, trying to find the specific brand of pasta sauce I liked. I was completely in my own world, not bothering anyone, just reading labels and comparing prices like any normal shopper would do. Then someone grabbed my elbow so hard I nearly fell over in those heels. I turned around and found this woman glaring at me like I'd just insulted her entire family. Her teenage daughter stood behind her, and I could see the embarrassment written all over the poor girl's face. She demanded to know where she could find the wine. I told her I didn't know and suggested she ask an employee, then asked her to please let go of me. She looked me up and down with disgust, still gripping my elbow so tight it hurt. She insisted I was an employee and told me to shut up and help her, or she'd get the manager. I'd read enough stories online to know exactly where this was heading. Some people just decide you work somewhere and won't accept any other reality. I kept my voice calm and polite. I told her again that I didn't work there and asked her to let go of me and leave me alone. I pulled my arm away and turned to walk in the opposite direction. I just wanted to get away from her and find my boyfriend so we could finish shopping and leave. That's when everything went wrong. Something hit the back of my head with incredible force. The pain was immediate and overwhelming. For a brief, terrifying moment, I genuinely thought I was dying. Everything felt wrong. I thought I was walking away, but I realized I wasn't moving at all. My hands had somehow found the shelf in front of me, and I was gripping it so hard my knuckles were white. It was the only thing keeping me upright. There was so much noise. People were yelling, screaming. But it all sounded far away, like I was underwater. I couldn't focus on any specific voice or word. Everything was spinning, and my head felt like it was splitting open. I tried to hold on, tried to stay conscious, but eventually the darkness won and I collapsed. When I woke up, I was in a hospital bed. The lights were too bright. My head was wrapped in bandages and the pain was excruciating. My boyfriend was sitting beside me holding my hand, his eyes red from crying. He looked like he'd aged 10 years. He told me what happened after I passed out. When I walked away from her, Karen had become so enraged that she grabbed a glass jar from the shelf and threw it at the back of my head with all her strength. She had excellent aim, I'll give her that. The jar shattered against my skull, causing severe wounds. People said she cracked my skull open. There was blood everywhere. Other shoppers immediately started screaming for help. The store staff came running and the manager called security and the police. My boyfriend heard the commotion and came sprinting over to find me lying unconscious in a pool of my own blood. He rode with me in the ambulance, holding my hand the entire time, praying I would survive. The police arrested Karen at the scene. Even when they handcuffed her, she kept screaming that she was just trying to teach me a lesson for looking down on her. She genuinely believed she was the victim in this situation. A few days after I woke up, Karen's husband came to the hospital with their 2 children. I'll never forget that visit. When they walked into my room and saw the extent of my injuries, the bandages covering my head, the machines I was hooked up to, they were completely unprepared. Her husband just broke down. He stood there crying, telling me over and over that she wasn't the woman he married. His voice was shaking. He kept apologizing and saying he didn't know what happened to her, that this wasn't who she was. Their son looked about 11 and their daughter was around 16. Both of them had tears streaming down their faces. The daughter looked horrified. At some point, both children came forward and hugged me. I was terrified. My body went completely rigid. I couldn't move even though my boyfriend was already there, holding me, crying into my shoulder. I didn't even realize I was crying until the children embraced me. That day was one of the worst of my entire life. We all just stood there crying together. So many lives destroyed because of one woman's rage. After they left, my boyfriend told me they'd already paid all my hospital bills without us even asking. We were worried it was some scheme to avoid a lawsuit, but it turned out her husband genuinely just wanted to help. The legal process was long and exhausting. Her lawyers tried every dirty trick imaginable to drag things out, hoping we'd give up or settle. But every delay just cost her more money. Her husband filed for divorce shortly after visiting me. He never showed up to court even once. Her children had to testify. Watching them on the stand was heartbreaking. Her daughter described her in court by saying she was a good mother, but when my lawyers asked her to describe what happened that day, she completely broke down crying. You could see in her eyes that she was terrified of what her mother had become. After they testified, they wanted nothing to do with the case or their mother anymore. Karen never showed remorse, not once. The only time she cried in court was when she took the stand and blamed me for ruining her life. No apology, no explanation, just anger and accusations. The case finally wrapped up a few weeks ago. She was sentenced to 12 years in prison on multiple charges. Along with the jail time, she had to pay all my legal expenses up front, which were substantial because of how long her lawyers dragged everything out. She also had to pay for my therapy up front. Her husband had divorced her by then, so all this money came from her own savings. Everything she'd accumulated was gone. The aftermath has been brutal. For an entire year after the attack, I couldn't leave my house. The fear was paralyzing. Every time I tried to step outside, I'd have a panic attack thinking someone would attack me again. I had memory issues for months that slowly improved with time. My boyfriend, now my husband, had to go to therapy too. He still has nightmares about finding me lying in that pool of blood. I still can't step inside grocery stores. Just thinking about it makes my heart race and my palms sweat. But I'm working on it with my therapist, taking it one day at a time. And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.